Hi, today we're going to be making a classic recipe but with a Métis twist. So how we're going to Métis-ify this recipe is to use ground bison or buffalo in place of ground beef, and this is going to be like a shepherd's pie video. So everything else would be about the same you'd find in a classic shepherd's pie. We got peas, carrots, corn, mashed potatoes. We are going to use a spice mix just to cheat and jarred garlic. But everything else will be made homemade. There's not going to be exact measurements. Mostly I'm going to just cook from like my heart, from how it smells and tastes. But I will include measurements if you do want to try it at home. But yeah, follow along. So first thing I'm doing here is peeling and dicing my potatoes so I can get them in the water to cook while the rest of the meat and veggies are cooking. I'm just cutting them in a medium dice and adding them to salted water on the stove. You want to make sure you add quite a bit of salt in there just to season your potatoes. If you wanted to go an extra step, you could cook them in like beef broth or vegetable broth to add extra flavor. So now I am peeling carrots and just cutting them into like a fine dice. If you wanted to save time and money, you could totally use like the pre-made frozen veggies that you can find at the grocery store that have the carrot, the peas, and the corn blend. So it saves some money, but I do think using fresh adds like a lot of flavor. Next, I am chopping an onion up. I like to do a really fine dice, especially when I'm cooking for other people, because some people are picky about onions, so when you chop them fine, then it kind of just dissolves into the meat. I am not using the proper knives for this because we did not have one. I would recommend using a chef's knife, but you know what, you use what you have. And I like to cut the onion in half and then cut along the segments of the onion, like follow along with that, and then use a knife and chop down. I find it's the fastest way. So the mushrooms might be a controversial ingredient in the shepherd's pie. I like to use them because I think they add a lot of umami flavors. So if I were at home, I would use a food processor and I would just put it all in there and chop it quite fine, but I don't have one here, so I'm doing it by hand. I think it's important to get them small so it kind of just mushes into the sauce and adds flavor without having chunks of mushrooms, because some people don't like mushrooms. I've turned my stove onto a medium heat and added about 2 tablespoons of oil. Buffalo is really lean, so you want to make sure you use oil. If you are using beef, you probably don't need to add oil. I'm going to saute these onions until they're translucent and starting to smell aromatic. So now your onions are smelling good. People are coming into the kitchen asking what you're cooking. You're going to add your mushrooms and carrots. You want to cook these down until the mushrooms completely have released all of the water. It does take a little bit of time for this, but I do think it's important because then you get a nice caramelization on the onions and on the carrots as well, which brings a lot of flavor. My potatoes are cooked now. I tested them to make sure they were fork tender so they would mash well. I am adding some butter, cream, and garlic and salt. If you're just doing this at home, you could totally use milk. I like to use cream because it makes them extra creamy, obviously, and I like to use a little bit of potato water that I've left in the bottom of the pot because I think that also makes it extra creamy and delicious. I like to use garlic, like pre-cut garlic that's in the jar, because I'm lazy and I hate when the garlic gets sticky on my fingers. So feel free to use that or real garlic, whatever your preference is. I just am adding that to my vegetable mixture now that everything's cooked down. Don't add this too early because garlic does burn very easily. Once your garlic's in there, you can add your ground bison. Just mash it around, let it cook all the way. There shouldn't be any fat with bison because it is quite lean. I like to add my spices and kind of let them bloom in like the heat with the oil from the meat and the olive oil we added. I don't know if that's proper, that's just the way I like to do it. I feel like it gives you a bolder, brighter flavor. Okay, so next you add your tomato paste, and you want to cook this down and let it caramelize a little bit. So if it sticks to the bottom of your pan, that's okay. We are going to add some water, so that will deglaze it, but let it get that flavor, let it caramelize and brown up a little bit. So I did not follow the instructions on the shepherd's pie spice packet. It says on there to add the water and the spice mix together and mix them up and then add it to the pot. I didn't do that. As you can see, it turned out fine, so do with that as you will. I just add that in and I'm going to let it thicken up a little bit. So once that water kind of comes to a boil or starts to thicken, I am just adding my frozen veggies, so my corn and my peas. I'm just going to mix that in and let this sit on the stove for a little bit and let the flavors marinate and let the gravy thicken up. So everything's all done now. So we got our meat all cooked, potatoes are mashed, and I'm gonna put it in these small little tin containers because I want to give them away or put in the freezer, which is a good idea, especially if you're a single person or a couple. These tin baking trays are the best because they come in different sizes, so depending on how many you're making it for, you can choose based on that. I just am very lazy. I hate doing dishes, so I usually go for these even if I'm just cooking at home, unfortunately. I hate scraping off baked on stuff or the classic move of leaving it in the sink to soak. I always say that to myself and end up regretting it later. I also like using the tin ones so you can give it away. So at the end of my workshops, when there's leftover food, usually I'll give it to like an elder in my community, or I will give it away to friends or family. So this is a great option for that. But again, I just hate doing dishes, so this saves a lot of hassle. I like to use a fork or the back of a spoon to create some like valleys and peaks in the mashed potatoes because that's what's going to get nice and crispy on the top, so the texture is good. You want to make sure that there's a little bit at least, just so yeah, it gets nice and golden and brown. When Larissa was editing this video, she was wondering why I put oven mitts on to put the shepherd's pie into the oven, but that's because it's hot. I just took this all off the stove, so if you're making it to eat immediately, make sure that you're not burning yourself when you put it in the oven. It's already cooked, so you don't have to leave it in there too long, and then I like to put it on broil just to get that nice crispy top. Okay, alright, so here is the shepherd's pie. It's all done. Once I packaged it into these tins, I just put it into the oven for about 10-15 minutes at 375, so the carrots could finish cooking and everything could marry, the flavors could develop, and then after that I put it in the oven on broil for about 5 minutes or so. Just keep an eye on it so that it can get nice and crispy on the top. If you want it extra crispy, you could leave it in a little bit longer than I did, and I just used a fork to kind of get some texture on the top so it could crisp up. This recipe made 3 of these little mini shepherd's pie. They feed about 2 people. Great if you're a couple or a single person. Then you can stick these in the oven, the freezer, and then put them in the oven later to reheat. They take quite a while to reheat if you're cooking them from frozen, so make sure you keep that in mind. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video of me Métis-ifying this classic recipe. And yeah, hope you enjoy, hope you try it. I hope that my coworkers will eat this. We'll see. The youth team did end up trying the shepherd's pie. They told me it was good, so hopefully they didn't lie to me, or that would be very embarrassing to put this on the internet. If you give it a try, let me know in the comments how you liked it, and follow for more recipes.